for me, yeah, Frank's attraction with the um, living world, mammalian and insect world, extended beyond spiders to all stinging and biting insects, things in the world. Because he once insisted that Lisa and I have a copy of it. Frank was always giving out presents, right, and not just food but books and things. And he showed up at our place with this book called Fang or something, Bitten, new book, and he was gifting them to people. He wanted us to be informed about things that could hurt us. There was a lawyer in him that was also very ethical and inclined in different ways than many other uh, legal aspirations that I know of. In 2004, there was a conference downtown Vancouver that included the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And at that, Desmond Tutu said, in our country, he told people in the Vancouver audience, in our country we speak of something called Ubuntu. When I want to praise you, the highest praise I can give to you is to say, you have Ubuntu. A person with Ubuntu has what it takes to be a human being. That person is a person who recognizes that he exists only because others exist. A person is a person through other persons. When we say you have Ubuntu, we mean you are gentle, you are compassionate, you are hospitable, you want to share, and you care about the welfare of others. This is because my humanity is intimately related to your humanity. I think it's really clear that Frank was a man of Ubuntu. I wish to share a story from one of his friends, a friend of Frank and Heather's, Margie McGrath, who also couldn't be here today. Where does Margie live? Maggie. Right, she lives here. She's unable to attend today. Maggie, when she was visiting, and she traveled to Dharamsala, India, in October 2018, and she kept thinking of Frank's medical issues and problems and was drawn to respond. She tried repeatedly at that time to get a private visit with the Dalai Lama, but got no response. Instead, she hand wrote the Dalai Lama this letter and left it with his representatives in Dharamsala. Your Holiness, it would be my deepest honor to sit with you briefly so that I may receive a blessing that I may carry home to Canada for my friends Heather Kahn and Frank McElroy. Frank is struggling with health concerns at this time, and it is my hope that your blessing will give them both strength and courage in this challenging time. I especially ask that you hold Frank in your heart so that his burden becomes lighter and he may feel some joy and lightness at this time. With deepest respect and love, Molaji, Maggie McGrath, October 22nd, 2018, 11 months ago. In response to this letter, Maggie was told that if she made a donation to the Dalai Lama Trust, Frank's name would be added to the list of people that the Dalai Lama would pray for. So that's what she did. When Maggie returned to Canada, she read this letter aloud to Frank as he lay at home on his couch. He was deeply moved and grateful for her thoughtfulness and open heart. It's a wonderful image to think of the Dalai Lama praying for Frank. We don't know for sure, but maybe that's part of what kept Frank going for much longer than anyone expected. We also know that Frank was a very enthusiastic historian. For about 3 decades, he lived in Marblehead, Massachusetts on the East Coast, one of the oldest towns in the United States. He totally revamped the Marblehead Historical Society that he joined when he lived there, and he lived for decades in one of the town's 18th century homes. Frank took his American heritage, the revolutionary roots of the United States, and the Declaration of Independence very seriously. When he moved here to Canada and to Roberts Creek, he attended the 4th of July party every year held by his friend Virginia Mills. He would read Ralph Waldo Emerson's poem, The Concord Hymn, and give attendees a brief history lesson about the important battle described in the poem. Frank loved poetry. He wrote poems to Heather, and he read the poetry of Jack Kerouac and many, many others. Henry Ewart, a Lower Mainland historian and friend of Frank's, is invited to come and share with us the Concord Hymn in Frank's memory.
I'm deeply honored to have been asked by Heather to read this poem, which meant a great deal to Frank's heart and to Heather's heart as well. Heather, as many of you know, and I co-authored a book together, just to place me for those of you who may not know this book, entitled Vancouver's Glory Years. Concord Hymn was written in 1837, 62 years after an event which was quite possibly the very first shot at the beginning of the American Revolution. It was written for the dedication, in the poem it's called A Shaft, dedication of an obelisk, a monument in Concord, Massachusetts, commemorating the Battle of Concord on April 19, 1775. Freedom and courage are vulnerable things that might be lost in history if they are not recorded for future generations. So said and thought Ralph Waldo Emerson. Only the spirit, larger than time or nature, is truly permanent. That's the bedrock of the poem. The poem is short, 16 lines, 4 stanzas, and with an inherent harmony and rhythm which lends itself well to it being called a hymn. Concord Hymn. By the rude bridge that arched the flood, their flag to April's breeze unfurled, here once the embattled farmers stood and fired the shot heard around the world. The foe long since in silence slept. Alike the conqueror silent sleeps. And time the ruined bridge has swept down the dark stream which seaward creeps. On this green bank, by this soft stream, we set today a votive stone, that memory may their deed redeem, when, like our sires, our sons are gone. Spirit that made those heroes dare to die and leave their children free, bid time and nature gently spare the shaft we raise to them and thee. Thank you.
Before I have us all do a ritual, I just wanted to say a couple more things. You all knew that Frank was a lawyer, but some of you might not have known the details of that. In his entire career, I believe he only lost 1 case or 2, I can't remember, not very many. And early on in his career, he actually only ever had 2 employers. The rest of the time he was self-employed, which actually inspired me to become self-employed. Anyway, and so early in his career, he actually represented some victims of mesothelioma, what you get from working with asbestos, and they actually wheeled in one of their clients in a gurney, probably just a few days before he died. Anyway, they were successful in that case, and in the biggest case he had that lasted over 20 years, It was a home that was built initially. It was a little iffy about the status of the land it was on. Frank represented the neighbors, a couple who immediately had all the light blocked out from their house. In fact, their children grew up without seeing any natural light at all. And all the way along, the owner of that house kept making this huge media campaign about how he was being wrong done by, even though he had knowingly knew that it was actually not in a legal placement and everything. So Frank had to work against a huge, basically, propaganda campaign. He used video, and because he was older, people thought, how could they be doing to this to this poor man? But all along, illegally, he was in the wrong, and Frank maintained that, and they ended up succeeding, and the house had to be torn down. I mean, they didn't want to do that, but he just kept going. But anyway, that was sort of the biggest case of Frank's career. And some of you might have known, if you read the obituary, he did have a circuitous route to ending up in law. He did spend, I think, one term at university in engineering and decided, nope, that's not for me. He got his degree in psychology. That's another area. And he was in pre-med at one point, and he actually ended up working as an orderly at a county hospital in New York. And the stuff he ended up doing for the doctors there, I mean, the stories he told me, he should never even have been allowed near. And he was doing work that was supposed to be people who have jobs with much more seniority than that. But he talked about working in the morgue and all these incredible stories. But one of the reasons why he chose not to go into medicine was because he didn't like the way the doctors treated the nurses. He just felt that whole atmosphere was not something he wanted to be in. And both of us were childs of doctors, so as you all know, the phenomenon of sort of doctors believing that they are God and everything. So we had that in common, knowing that being raised by fathers who felt like that they were God. So anyway, he didn't want to be part of that culture, and so he decided not to do that. So anyway, I'm grateful that he decided to become a lawyer. And Don did mention the EcoTour boat company that he was a partner of. They used to run Friday night cruises called Attitude Adjustment Cruise, and people end up really enjoying it. They serve food, salmon dinners, and people were able to let off steam. And then at one point, when there were tall ships in the harbor, their company was the only one that was allowed to go right up close to the ships, because as you probably know, and a lot of boat companies are sort of fly-by-night operations, but Frank, being a lawyer, made sure that everything was done properly and maintained all right and everything. So he was very proud of that. You've probably heard the term Cosmos Mariner that Frank has used, and that's what he wanted to have on his cemetery plaque. And it actually comes from the book Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, which he really liked. It was actually Conrad Aiken, the author, who used that. It says Cosmos Mariner, Destination Unknown. And he has a bench in Savannah, Georgia. And that's where I think Frank got the idea of his bench. And SCRD, when we got Frank's bench, Frank actually came and talked to the SCRD rep, and she was kind of shocked because never in her 30-year-odd career she had actually dealt with someone who was there before the bench got put in. So Frank was very happy to be able to get down there and get on the bench and have photo. We had friends take pictures of both of us on it, so it meant a lot to him, because even then he was thinking about what's this is going to be for other people. So anyway, yeah, as George mentioned, I don't know, I'll have to see if I can get through this or not. Anyway, Frank did have a lot of characteristics of a Taoist master. Like, I thought it was ironic that I'm the one who's doing yoga, going to meditation, all these things that Frank never did, and yet he, to me, seemed to embody all the qualities like that I had been trying for like decades to achieve. So anyway, so I just wanted to read there is a poem here from the book The Way of Chung Tzu, and it's called The Man of Tao. The man in whom Tao acts without impediment harms no other being by his actions, yet he does not know himself to be kind, to be gentle. The man in whom Tao acts without impediment does not bother with his own interests and does not despise others who do. He does not struggle to make money and does not make a virtue of poverty. He goes his way without relying on others and does not pride himself on walking alone. While he does not follow the crowd, he won't complain of those who do. Rank and reward make no appeal to him. Disgrace and shame do not deter him. He is not always looking for right and wrong, always deciding yes or no. The ancients said, therefore, the man of Tao remains unknown. Perfect virtue produces nothing. No self is true self, and the greatest man is nobody. So you'll see for some of the people who are sitting on the tables, there's a circular bowl there with some tea lights on it. And I'd invite you to, there are some matches there, I'd invite you to light the candles. And for those of you, if you want, there are also some red boxes there, and there's some pieces of paper and some pens. If you'd like to write a note, if you want to say something to Frank now, write it to him, and then you put it in the little box, or whatever you feel like saying, you can do that. And I just want, the reason why I wanted to call this Circle of Life is because to reinforce the continuity of life, and also that we got married in a labyrinth, which is concentric circles. And Frank was very much into the symbolism of the Moebius strip, the figure 8, which is a symbol of infinity. And also when we were married, we had a hand fasting ceremony, which is putting your wrists in a figure of 8 format. So the circle is our oldest human symbol on the planet, so it has encompassed a lot of things. And the writer Anais Nin said, life is a full circle, widening until it joins the circle motions of the infinite. And Ralph Waldo Emerson said, our life is an apprenticeship to the truth that around every circle another circle can be drawn, that there is no end in nature, but every end is a beginning, that there is always another dawn risen on mid-noon, and under every deep a lower deep opens. So anyway, I invite you guys to light the candles and write some messages to Frank, and then I'll just read, well, before they do that, I'll read one more thing, because some of you might have known Frank was adopted, and there was some suggestion, all he knew from his birth mother was that his birth father was a high-profile beat poet. Like, she wouldn't tell him who it was, but Frank did some sleuthing and actually determined he thinks that it was Jack Kerouac, but based on where he was. So anyway, that sort of has always formed him throughout his life. So and he actually belongs, there's like a Jack Kerouac society or something, and then some of the relatives have said, oh, you really look a lot like our relatives or what. Anyway, but I'll just, there's one poem here that Jack Kerouac wrote that I thought was appropriate. He says, the only people for me are the mad ones, the ones who are mad to live, mad to talk, mad to be saved, desirous of everything at the same time, the ones who never yawn or say a commonplace thing, but burn, 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 like fabulous yellow Roman candles. Exploding like spiders across the stars. There's the spiders. And in the middle, you see the blue center light pop, and everybody goes, ah. So anyway, I invite you to light some candles and write him some.
Welcome back. Hope you had a chance to have a nibble, have a little chit chat, and also a piece of cake. It is wonderful to be with you and share in a celebration of Frank's life and also our loss, and the loss for Heather and other family members, Dawn and cousins, and but especially important to it feels just so good to remember Frank in this way. Was connected with him in events in the past year, and including a big dinner at the Gumboot in January. That was the occasion of your birthday, wasn't it, Heather? And it just seems like it was just a moment ago where we were all seated around the table. Just it was a great night, and well, the last time Frank got up and about. But there you have it. So we're going to have an open mic in this session, and before we quite get there, we're going to have a toast in Frank's honor, and I will be leading that in just a moment. And just as a preface to that, I thought I wanted to read out a quick stanza from a poem that to me has a deep evocation of Frank, and it's by the Welsh poet Dylan Thomas. Frank would have a connection and appreciation for Dylan Thomas's poetry, I'm sure, especially with a name like Frank Lloyd McElroy. So this is a stanza from Dylan Thomas's poem, "And Death Shall Have No Dominion." And death shall have no dominion. Dead men, naked they shall be one with the man in the wind and the west moon. When their bones are picked clean and the clean bones gone, they shall have stars at elbow and foot. Though they go mad, they shall be sane. Though they sink through the sea, they shall rise again. Though lovers be lost, love shall not, and death shall have no dominion. I had nothing to do with writing that poem. Thank you. So, come time to have a toast for Frank, and I was thinking, well, what can I possibly think that's interesting, and came to me. And it goes like this. We've been talking today about the nature, the possibility that Frank is a person of great Ubuntu, and that he held such a broad bandwidth and empathy for the world he inhabited, the world of living, non-living things, the world of phenomena. And for me, I totally recognize that from Frank. It was true the minute I first met him. And he had a great and abiding curiosity in the world and in me, in others. And that's a pretty special quality of relationship for someone to demonstrate that consistently. And I believe Frank did that. And I believe he did it through a unique expression that perhaps some of you would recognize. And that expression was, "No shit." Not a no shit in a dismissive way at all, but no shit in a way that was trying to elicit and provoke information. Frank was truly interested, and that languaging brought him into close contact with me. I don't know if it's true for you, but it was true for me. That no shit was this evocation to learn more, because Frank truly was interested in who I was and what was going on for me in my life. I hope that's true for you. I will remember Frank through that phrase, and I ask you to join me in raising a glass to Frank, and we're saying, no shit! To Frank. Oh. And Frank is looking down right now going, no shit. So we're going to have the open mic portion of this event now, and I just thought maybe I'd kick it off with another quick anecdote that relates to when I first met Frank about, well, I can put it down to this. It was in 2007, 2006. So not long after he and Heather were married. I think it was when George introduced me to Frank, and we became friends almost immediately. And I got him very interested in a company I was working for, a startup company involved in generating renewable electricity from tidal currents. And Frank became a quick investor and advocate of this. There were many sessions with Frank around blue energy. George shared in some of those. Don't ask what happened to our investments. Still a good idea, mind you. But one of the events that happened in 2007 was I turned 50 years old at that moment, at that time, in that fall. And Frank and Heather and George and Marilee, my wife Lisa, and our daughter Robin, we all set off with backpacks in early November. I think it was the first weekend of November, to climb Mount Steele in the Tetrahedron Park. And that fall had been a rather cool, damp fall, and there was a fair amount of snow, if I can use that term. I know it's still September here, but a season is approaching, my friends. There was quite a bit of snow, and so we loaded up our backpacks, and we were going to go and stay the night in the cabin at the top of Mount Steele, and away we set off, and we got to the Edwards Lake cabin there, and so far so good, but it was kind of rainy and cool, and we weren't sure were we going to find much snow. Well, not long after that, where you start making quite a steep ascent, we were starting to get into some snow, and some serious snow, 8 inches, 10 inches, 15 inches. Frank is not in the best of shape at that time. He was there was a little bit more of Frank than at other times. And I'd say he had not devoted a lot of his life to exercise and fitness, and he was clearly laboring. And as we started to make our way through the snow and up this steep section of the mountain, the rest of the mountain, and who knows what we're going to find up above, I started to resist the notion that we needed to go any further. I said, "Hey, this is my party, and I vote we stay at the Edwards Lake cabin that we'd already passed instead of continuing to ascend the mount." And Frank wouldn't hear of it. He goes, no, I'm not turning around. We're going up. And Frank, it's my decision to make. It's my party, kind of thing. I don't want, you look like your health is just not going to support you getting up there. Your fitness this isn't going well. You're starting to look a little purple to me, my friend. He would not hear of turning back. He had a big pack, and by now we're into snow that's up to our thighs, and he's kind of struggling. But he goes, "You can go on, but I'm right behind you, or I'm gonna lead the trail, break the trail up there. But no, we are not turning back." The story is, it was a successful trip. We made it to the top. We made it down. It was a snowy adventure, and it all turned to wet rain the next day and wet snow. But it was an example for me of this incredible tenacious quality of Frank's. That was really my introduction to it. I didn't want to go up that mountain any further. I didn't want to be thinking that we might be having to haul him out, and the firemen is carrying back down the mountain, or worse. He had this massive determination to go on. I think that would have served him well in any century, and Frank would have fit well in almost any century I can think of. So that's my anecdote. Frank going up the mountain.
I wanted to say that in his earlier days, like in high school, Frank was actually quite the jock. He was skier and was actually going to be a competitive ski racer at one point, but apparently his father put the kibosh on that. He didn't approve of that. He was a track and field star in high school. In fact, I was surprised when I was looking at his yearbook. A number of his fellow students said that they thought he was actually going to make Olympic level competition. So it's just interesting that he did do a lot of athletic sports stuff, but I guess law became sort of an all-consuming thing for him, which he really loved, and because it really evoked his sense of service. So he never, I guess got that chance. And tennis too, he was a very good tennis player and never got the chance to, as he got older, to continue that. But I just wanted to say one thing. One of the things I've done is when I was going through his room, he had an office room in our house that was just like a disaster area with piles of stuff, and I started pulling these bins out that I didn't even know existed under the bed in there, and there were all these old photos, some of them from his childhood and youth that I had never seen before, so I started making these albums. And one of the things I came across, which I completely forgot about, was at our wedding, one of our friends, Raj, had actually given us as a wedding present named a star after us in honor of our wedding, and it was in the Cygnus constellation, which I don't know anything about constellations, but anyway, as part of his cemetery marker or plaque, one of the things he wanted on that was the two constellations, the Northern Cross and the Southern Cross. And I mean, because he was very much into sailing and marine navigation, and I don't know anything about that. So I was like going back and forth with the people who make up the signs, trying to figure out. I'm looking on the internet, like how many stars are in these constellations or whatever. But then I end up finding out that the Cygnus constellation is actually in the Northern Cross. I didn't know that, so I just thought that was kind of an interesting synchronicity. That, and I'm sure he had forgotten all about it too. That the constellations that are on the plaque include the one that our friend gave us the gift to, so I just thought that was kind of neat. So, Diane, you wanted to say something?
Excuse me for reading. I don't think I can remember all of this. I wanted to say a few words about Frank and his association with the Little Legion. Cleaning out my inbox last week, in which 22,000 emails had somehow accumulated, I found 412 messages from Frank, all sent during the 3 years we volunteered together here, along with many other of his friends in this room. Frank was a huge fan of this Little Legion, and every single one of those messages signified his ongoing support, offers of help and ideas and donations of every kind, mostly anonymous. Sorry, Frank. And the raw, positive attitude, keep it up thing that he was so good at. Frank's name was never officially on that board back there. There were times I think he fancied himself a secret agent, which only makes his dedication even more impressive, as it was completely under the radar, never looking for recognition, solely because he believed in community and the Legion's role in bringing community together. 412 emails, I won't read them all here, but I'll give you a little taste, spanning our early fundraising days when he reached out to the community, conceived of and donated our Team 219 buttons, and the parking lot signs that you saw when you came in today, helping with soccer Sundays, being in the kitchen, making chili for Grey Cup and the hockey playoffs, running the Friday barbecues, negotiating with TELUS for a better deal, editing and proofreading grant proposals, attending meetings, opening the Legion for musicians to set up or meeting beer deliveries, cleaning up trash in the parking lot on Sundays with Heather, helping with and hosting Brain Freeze Trivia Night, being the Tuesday Jam's greatest fan and ambassador, liaising with neighbors and their concerns, and in his very favorite role, greeting everyone at that front desk as Norman the doorman. In his natty white suit and bow tie, ever smiling, ever the gentleman. He did so much. Always with that innocence, and every day is a new day, and playfulness. It wasn't always work, though. On a more personal note, we all loved Frank's stories on the deck. And I think my favorite was hearing him tell about how he was hit by lightning twice. I told him, no, actually it's 3 times. The third one, you fell in love with Heather. And he laughed and he loved it. So, on behalf of the Legion and Frank's little Legion friends, let's raise a toast in thanks for his countless contributions, and to Heather for sharing him with us.
Yes, Diane.
Yeah, just to add on to that, for some reason Frank seemed to be the only person that could reestablish the cable, I think it was the cable connection here with TELUS. Like, people would madly phone our house and say, we need Frank to come over, because nobody else could do it. And so he would come and somehow do the magic thing that needed to get it restored. So. Does anybody want to share? Connie? Connie was our next door neighbor who lived right next to the Legion here.
Hello, everybody. I used to live right next door. I'm very nervous. I don't do this.
Can you move a little closer to the mic?
Okay. My favorite story about Frank was I had some friends visiting. I think it was a Labor Day long weekend. And they come over from Muscogee. And there were 6 or 7 of them, and Frank and Heather came. And after a great night of food and drinking and carousing and carrying on, there was Frank and one other person, Seaborn, who lives on Muscogee Island. He runs a charter boat service on Muscogee. Anyway, about midnight, we'd all had enough. We were all exhausted, and Frank and Seaborn were still on my deck. So I said, when you're finished, turn out the light when you're going home. The next morning I got up, and Frank, because he's such a generous spirit, had given his 35-foot sailboat to Seaborn. Gave it to him. And so Seaborn took it over, and he moors it on Muscogee Island, where he doesn't pay any mortgage. And Frank went over, I think, once to see it, and then Seaborn's taking really good care of it. And that's Frank. And that's my favorite story about Frank. And I would just like to say, in our family tradition, when there's a get-together, we always raise a toast to the absent one. So here's to the absent one.
I could go on ad nauseum, but when Frank was in hospice, he made a really special connection with some of the nurses there, and one of them was a very young nurse, and it turned out that she and her husband, they had a boat, and Frank used to make his own fly fishing, I don't even know what you call them, lures, anyway, and so flies, yeah. So anyway, he just commanded to me to go and find all his gear and the fly fish, and then give them to her. So then I found out that they're not allowed to receive gifts from patients. So we had to sort of circumvent that. I won't tell you how that happened, but anyway. Anyway, so that's what happened. I mean, it was just wonderful to watch them talk about that. And also her dog was one of the ones shown in the video. When I told people that Frank loved dogs, all the nurses would try to come in and bring their dogs in, and hers was one of the ones that he really appreciated having around. And then one of the head nurses too, she was talking about when they had a sailboat and they were going to retire and go around, and Frank, being a really avid boat person, actually started talking to her, and her husband ended up coming in to talk to Frank too. And the nurse was so surprised because she said her husband is very shy. She was really shocked that he actually came in. So Frank made a connection with him. And she actually, the night Frank died, she was crying. I just got told this by the hospice volunteer who was there with me when Frank died. She was crying. She said, you'd think that after all this, but she said Frank was special. So anyway, she said to me, Frank was an amazing person and you were very blessed. So to hear that from a nurse who deals with dying people all the time, that was really meant a lot. So.
I had the opportunity, because my wife cooks Indian food, and Frank loved Indian food, and Rashmi would make up tiffins, those metal containers of food, and I would take it down, and I would be able to sit with Frank while they had it, and listen to his stories, and I really appreciate that, and feel very blessed to have that opportunity. And I really honored and appreciated Frank for the enthusiastic interest he took in our son, in encouraging me on his path, and his interest in law and that sort of thing. And I thought I would sing a song for Frank. It's an Irish song about parting. Oh, of all the money that e'er I spent, I have spent it in good company, and all the harm that e'er I done, alas, it was to none but me. And for all I've done, for want of wit, to memory now I can't recall. So fill to me the parting glass. Good night and joy be with you all. Oh, of all the comrades that e'er I had, they are sorry for my going away. And all the sweethearts that e'er I had, they would wish me one more day to stay. But since it falls unto my lot that I should rise and you should not, come fill to me the parting glass. Good night and joy be with you all.
It seems like a good
Never
time.
mind.
in seconds from now.
Oh, second.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to just, is there anyone else who would like to come up and say something to the microphone?
Last call.
Good night and joy be with you all. What I'd like to do at this time is read out some acknowledgements and offer some thanks for people who helped make this happen today. Many thanks to everyone who's helped out here today, especially Hans Seilen and Denise Spink for their catering services. For Jamie Bowers, helping with music, and more to come. Arthur Lee, helping with video and videography. To Don McElroy and Susan Jensen, who've traveled here from long ways away. Thanks for your contribution. Frank? To Gene Hamilton for helping with setup. And the 2 hours of audio visual karma crunching. Thanks a lot, Gene, for your help there. For John Davis in audio. John, thanks for the music mix that you provided. For Gail Bland, bartending. Gail, thanks so much for your help always. To Bronye Kingsbury and Denise for the flowers that you helped provide. Thank you. Alana Robinson and Hospice for the loan of the projector. To Diana, Roberts Creek Hall manager, for the loan of extra chairs. To Svenja and Klaus Muse. Svenja and Klaus Muse for catering and setup as well. Thank you so much. And last but not least, deep gratitude to Roberts Creek Little Legion and all friends, community members who provided donations, food, and your TLC and love during Frank's illness. No question you filled his heart and soul and Heather's as well. So thanks so much. Thanks so much for coming. Take it away, Jamie.
All right, well, this is a joyous kind of a song by Stevie Wonder called Isn't She Lovely? It was about a baby, but I think we'll think of it as Isn't He Lovely? Frank.
Thank you.